Om Gurave Nama. Om Gurave Nama. Om Gurave Nama. Namaste, everybody, and welcome to this video examining the chart of Meghan Markle, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. This is part 3 of a video series on Meghan Markle. And in this video, I want to talk about a very important planetary combination in the chart, which is called Graha Yuddha. Graha Yuddha means planetary war, and planetary war happens when two planets are within 1 degree of each other in the chart. And this is happening with Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn are in planetary war, being within 1 degree of each other. And we see in the Shadbala calculations, under the Yuddha calculations, all planets are fine, but once you get to Jupiter, there is a negative number, and Saturn has a positive number. So Jupiter is negative 320, Saturn is positive 320. What that says is that Saturn has actually won the war with Jupiter. Now, you might wonder why that's the case, because Jupiter actually is showing a higher degree than Saturn in the chart, in the way the degrees are listed. Saturn is listed at 13 degrees 5, and Jupiter is listed 13 degrees 5. Saturn is 12 degrees 16 minutes. But the planetary war calculation is a bit complex, and it does require an additional feature in the calculation, which is the declination, because in the actual position of the planets, we can't say for sure that that Jupiter is ahead of Saturn from perspective on the planetary positions that is objective and not geocentric. So that, long story short, it requires a calculation that then determines the winner and loser. Here, the winner is Saturn, the loser is Jupiter. Mind you, both have lost. Any planet in planetary war is going to lose. Planetary war is not anything to celebrate, and even the winner of planetary war is afflicted in the sense that they now have an enemy. The loser of a war is often very unhappy, may carry a grudge, may be very upset and angry, even though they have lost. It doesn't mean that the winner is simply victorious, right? So planetary war energy is actually quite complex. It's complicated. Now, Jupiter is afflicted. Jupiter is afflicted because it is conjunct Saturn and in planetary war with Saturn. Jupiter also has the Rashi Dristi of Mars, which is a malefic planet, and very significantly, Jupiter is in the 3rd house. From Cancer, Jupiter is in the 3rd house, and when Jupiter is in the 3rd house in any chart, this is the position known as Marana Karaka Sthana, MKS, and that is the position where the planet feels like it is dying. Every planet has a position where it feels like it is dying. In the case of Jupiter, it's the 3rd house. The 3rd house is the opposite of its natural house, its natural placement in the in the ninth house where it feels very comfortable. Jupiter it owns the natural ninth house, the Nisargika ninth house. That means that if you start from Aries, if we just don't look at Meghan's chart for a minute, if you start from Aries, which is here, Jupiter owns the ninth house of Sagittarius in the natural zodiac. I'm showing you the derivation why Jupiter is very unhappy in the third house. The ninth house is the house of the guru, it's the house of religion, it's a house of teaching, it's a house of spiritual path and dharma. And this is where Jupiter flourishes, this is where Jupiter excels. Being in the third house, that's being in the third house. This is the third house of the natural zodiac, starting from Aries. This is the third house. This is Gemini. And Gemini is the house of brothers, younger siblings, siblings in general, peers, colleagues. It's the house where one may be a new starter in a program, a trainee, an initiate, a place where people take initiative and initiate new projects, short travel and communication, and it is also the house of copulation. And also, it represents the brothel. Mercury being a Rajasic planet, Mercury ruling Gemini. Mercury is very curious planet and gets into trouble. And one of the troubles that Mercury gets into is feeling quite comfortable roaming the hallways of a brothel. Now, Jupiter does not want to be in the house of the brothel, does not want to be in the house of copulation or the house of peers, the house of colleagues, the house of siblings. All of this is quite humiliating to Jupiter. Jupiter is the guru. Jupiter would prefer to be sitting on a on a mountaintop, meditating, contemplating, teaching, preaching, and so on. And so in any chart, when Jupiter is in the third house, now in this case, Meghan's starting sign is Cancer, so Jupiter is here in the third house. Jupiter is unhappy. So generally, the significators of Jupiter are going to feel unhappy. Now, what is important about this is to understand that Jupiter is the planet for Meghan's father. So the ninth house in Meghan's chart happens to be Pisces, and the ninth house Lord Jupiter is the significator of the father, and we can study the relationship between the Lagnesh and the Lord of the Father sign to understand the relationship between father and child, between Meghan's father and Meghan. And the planetary energies here are indicating a complicated relationship, which has played out in her life and also in the public eye. There's a very high profile story about the fact that Meghan's father didn't attend her wedding with Prince Harry, and also was aligning himself with the press for personal gain and so on. And this is all very well documented, and Meghan has spoken directly about this. So this is not hearsay. This is you can find the storyline out there. But here, interestingly, we see it play out in the Jyotish chart, in the Vedic astrological chart. Jupiter is very, very unhappy. Where it is, it's unhappy. It generally, first of all, it's usually not that happy with Saturn. Saturn and Jupiter are not friends. They have very different agendas, very different ways of being, ways of operating. And in a way, Saturn neutralizes um, Jupiter's abilities, Jupiter's ability to walk, as a teacher, as an authority, as a priest, and so on, the natural energies of Jupiter. Saturn neutralizes those. Jupiter is then humiliated in MKS. So in Marna Karakastana, Jupiter feels humiliated. So the father, so in this case, Meghan's father is unhappy, and unhappy in the presence of the child. Remember, we are reading the father's energy through the chart of the child. We can look at the father's chart if we have the birth chart and see what's happening there. But from the perspective of the child, there is an unhappiness because of the placement of the father's planet in the chart of the child's planet. In this case, Meghan's chart. Now, what's further complicating the situation is the fact that the moon is also in Virgo with Saturn and Jupiter. The moon in Virgo, so in other words, Meghan's Lagnesh is in Virgo. What this shows is that Meghan feels very close to her father. Regardless of the challenges and regardless of how unhappy, how disgruntled the father feels, how resentful the father feels, how humiliated the father feels, Meghan feels close to the father because the Lagnesh is in the same house as the father. And if you notice, actually, all the three of these planets are in close degrees. The moon is in 11 degrees, Saturn is 12 degrees, Jupiter is 13 degrees. So it's a very tight energy here. And I'm not saying this is a good energy, actually. This is a challenging placement. Now Mars is casting Rashi Dristi and Graha Dristi on Virgo and the planets in Virgo. So there's a very strong Mars impact on the third house and on this bit of a challenging, very messy kind of situation with planetary war, MKS, Saturn, which is bringing suffering. Usually Saturn and the moon together bring depression and kind of a negative outlook on life. But it doesn't seem that Meghan has historically in her life been somebody who sees a very negative view of things or is struggling with serious depression. And there are also some reasons for that. Okay, so um, without trying to, not trying to jump around too much, but one thing to keep in mind here, which is a blessing, is that the moon is in parivartana with Rahu and Mercury. So Rahu and Mercury own Virgo, the moon owns Cancer, and they have exchanged signs. And so what's happening there is that actually Meghan is somewhat saved from this deeply afflicted third house. This third house being deeply afflicted by the planetary war and a very strong aspect of Mars. Mars is aspected by Graha Dristi as well as Rashi Dristi, both Dristis. Mars has a fourth aspect, a fourth house aspect in Graha Dristi, and Gemini and Virgo are naturally aspecting each other in Rashi Dristi. So this heats up this house. This house gets heated up with the energy of Mars, and Mars can be um, anger and potentially negative emotions. But like I say, something that saves Meghan is the parivartana. And what that does is that the moon feels the moon feels like it is in Cancer at home. So the moon actually feels good. The moon feels like they are where they belong, even despite the hardship of the yoga of where it actually is. in parivartana, the moon doesn't physically transition signs. The moon is still in Virgo, but the outlook on life is a combination of this hardship as well as a very empowered moon, which is at home in Cancer. Moon in Cancer in the first house. Again, Mahapurusha Yoga. That's a very powerful yoga. It's not actually there, but the feeling of it is there. Okay, so the feeling of it is there that gives a sense of confidence and, in a way, a kind of equanimity to the suffering. So that may seem like maybe a detachment, like a feeling somewhat detached from the suffering. I mean, that's not to say that, she has suffered and she has felt very, very deeply about circumstances that have affected her. But this is a blessing in the sense it has saved her from ultimately very serious mental health crisis. Because if there wasn't this parivartana, if the moon was not in exchange with the two lords of Virgo is ruled by Rahu and Mercury, and Rahu and Mercury are both in Cancer, and so they're both flipping to Virgo, and vice versa. Moon is flipping to Cancer. If that parivartana didn't exist, then my prediction would have been that this person would have experienced a lot more mental health crisis in their life, to the point where it might have affected their ability to function in the world, to move through life, have friends, have a career, and so on. So that's a real blessing. But the suffering is still real. The suffering is there. We see it here. Jupiter being the lord of the sign of the father, being in planetary war with Saturn and having lost that planetary war. The moon being in the same sign as the father gives this person a feeling of closeness with the father, a feeling like comfort being in the same room as the father, despite how the father is, despite how the father is a feeling, if they're feeling uh, unhappy in the presence of the child is not necessarily feeling unhappy in the presence of the father, because because they're sharing the house, and the moon is somewhat saved by the parivartana. So this explains a lot. Um, the Jupiter is also the karaka, the natural karaka for the husband, just like Venus is the natural karaka, the natural significator for the wife. Jupiter in a woman's chart is the significator for husband. So the husband is also suffering here. The husband is also being negatively affected. So and that has played out as well. Meghan has suffered after marriage with Prince Harry. Prince Harry has suffered after marriage as well, having lost so much of his existing life, and the breakdown of family relations. Um, we see that play out here. There's one last thing that I want to point out, which I think is quite interesting, which is that if you look at the affliction, the major affliction in Meghan's chart, it's in Virgo. Jupiter, the husband, and the father. The husband as natural karaka, and the father as temporal lord of the father's sign, is heavily, heavily afflicted. Probably uh, the most afflicted planet in the chart. And possibly some remedial measures for Jupiter would be valuable for Meghan. Um, Yellow sapphire being one of them, but that does require a deeper analysis. Certainly, yellow sapphire for Cancer rising is is not out of the question because it strengthens the ninth house. The ninth house is afflicted. But the point I want to make here is that what I find interesting is that there is an affliction in the sign of Virgo in Meghan's chart. And if we look at Harry's chart, so this is Harry's chart here, there is an affliction in the sign of Virgo again, because as you may have known from my videos in Prince Harry, is that Virgo is housing Venus in Harry's chart. Venus is debilitated with Graha Dristi of Rahu and this Papakatara Yoga between hemmed in between Saturn, the Sun, and Mercury. And so I find it interesting that in both charts, the affliction is happening in the sign Virgo. Venus, so the wife is afflicted in Harry's chart, and the husband is afflicted in Meghan's chart in the same Rashi. And that means something. There is a symmetry there in their karmas. And this is why people fall in love. One of the reasons, so many reasons why people fall in love, but one of the reasons can be that there is a symmetry in the afflictions in the chart. And so when, Harry's meets Meghan and finds that she's not recoiling from the affliction in his chart, and similarly vice versa, he's not recoiling from the affliction in her chart. There is a deeper feeling of affection and even maybe an unconscious gratitude, towards the other, that you accept me, you accept my planetary energies, whatever they are, however they are being presented. This is all subconscious. This is not necessarily a conscious realization, but it might drive their feelings for each other, this feeling of comfort with each other, because certainly both have very, very strong affliction for each each of the significators of the spouse. Meghan has an afflicted Jupiter, and Harry has an afflicted Venus. But then there's also the remedial planets, and the fact that in both charts there is some either cancellation of the debility in Harry's chart, and in Meghan's chart there is a very fortunate parivartana that in a way saves the moon from being really crushed in this difficult situation. So that explains the father. It explains the sort of surprising, unusual events that happened with Meghan and her father, and why Meghan was still so willing to reach out. Meghan didn't have this feeling of a separation from the father. Was willing to reach out and connect, and the father reacted with actions of betrayal, and that can be seen here. You can see this here. It's not to blame anybody for actions. In Jyotish, we're not here to blame and judge. We're here to understand and accept. And through studying the planetary energies in the chart, we can see why things happen the way they do. And this can be incredibly healing. So with that, I conclude this video. Thank you for your attention. Namaste.